Welcome to Preeminent Test Prep. Today is day 32 in our 90-day SAT prep series. Today we're going to be spending about 20 to 25 minutes with the math section, and then we'll switch over and spend right around half an hour with the SAT writing section. So for the math section today, we're going to be doing problems 23 through 30 out of a 2018 SAT released test from the state of Maine. So we're going to be going through 23 through 30, which are the hardest problems from the SAT math with calculator section. We know that the SAT math section gets progressively harder as we go on through the multiple choice part of it, and we know that these are towards the back of that multiple choice part, so we know that they're going to be some of the more or the most difficult questions we would see on this SAT. And then after that, we're going to go ahead and switch over to the SAT writing section then, and then I'll give you my tips, tricks, advice, strategies, and all that good stuff over there. But for now, I'm going to give you my tips, tricks, and strategies, ways to be efficient on the SAT math section. So with that, make sure you have a notebook out so you can write down strategies and ways to be more efficient. And let's go ahead and get started with question 23. Okay, so questions 23 and 24 actually refer to a diagram above here. Right, we see that it tells us that it refers to it. We have a phase diagram for a substance. I see I have pressure on my y-axis, temperature on my x-axis, and then the different phases they're at based on those. So during mineral formation, the same chemical compound can become different minerals depending on the temperature and pressure at the time of formation. A phase diagram is a graph that shows the conditions needed to form each mineral. The graph above is a portion of the phase diagram for aluminosilitis. The temperature T in degrees Celsius on the horizontal axis and the pressure P in gigapascals on the vertical axis. All right, so let's take a look at our questions. We go down here. We got question 23. Okay, so they give me an equation. They say that this equation is the boundary line between Andalusite and Sillimanite regions, and it's approximated by the equation. What is the meaning of the t-intercept of this line? Okay, one thing we have to understand is for the t-intercept of this line. Okay, the way that you go wrong with this problem is you go wrong by thinking of the p-intercept. Okay, whenever we see an equation that looks like this, typically when we think of an intercept, we would think, oh, this is our intercept. Not in this case because we're asked for the t-intercept. Okay, the t-intercept in this case is going to be where P equals 0. Okay, where P equals 0 is where our t-intercept is. Okay, so the meaning of that has to do something with the pressure being 0. Okay, so let's look for an option that says something about our pressure being 0. So we have option A, it is the maximum temperature at which sillimanite can form. No, it's not the maximum temperature. Okay, that says nothing about pressure being 0. B, it is the temperature at which both andesite and sillimanite can form when there is no pressure applied. Okay, no pressure applied means pressure is 0. So yes, that's our correct answer, B. Okay, we have to include that there's no pressure, right? That's what it means. That's the temperature where it can be both andesite and sillimanite. Okay, either one could form when there's no pressure, right? No pressure, whatever this t-intercept is, that's going to be that temperature at which both can form because it's the boundary line. Okay, so answer there is going to be B. All right, so as far as tips you should put in your notes there, the big tip here is understanding that if we're asked for a t-intercept, right, or if we were asked for, say our equation said y equals mx plus b, the x-intercept, right, we need to understand that that means that that y would equal 0, okay? So we got to make sure we're paying attention to which intercept we're asked to find. Okay, so it's very, very important is understanding which intercept we're looking at and which one we are interpreting the meaning of. Okay, if we were to do that incorrectly and look at this 1.11, we're going to get the wrong answer. Okay, so we have to make sure we're doing that correctly. So understand which intercept you're asked to interpret. In this case, that's going to be the one where there's no pressure applied, so my answer there is going to be B. Okay, we look at C, it says it is the increase in the number of degrees Celsius needed to remain on the boundary between andesite and sillimanite if the pressure is reduced by 1. No, that would be indicating something with slope. Okay, if we're reducing a pressure by 1 or something, that's indicating to me something with slope. D, it's the decrease in the number of gigapascals of pressure needed to remain on the boundary if the temperature is increased by 1 degree Celsius. Once again, that's dealing with a rate and that's dealing with a slope. So that's not going to be anything with intercepts. Okay, now we've got question 24. Okay, keep in mind it's also referring to that information in that phase diagram. So which of the following systems of inequalities best describes the region where sillimanite can form? Well, we have to go back up and find where sillimanite can form, come up with the equations for that. Okay, so let's go up. Let's find where sillimanite can form. I see sillimanite. In order for it to form, it's going to have to be greater than this line, and I'm going to pick a different color so you can see it more clearly. Okay, I'm going to draw it right along it. Okay, in order for sillimanite to form, it's got to be greater than this line in blue. Okay, so what is this line? Well, let's go ahead and draw a line up. One thing that we have to pay attention to here is we have a broken scale. Okay, we don't start at 0, we start at 400. So if we start at 400, and I guess I misused the word broken scale there, but you get what I'm saying. If we have 400 here, 500 here, we don't have 0 there. So our intercept isn't going to be at 0.6. It's going to be pretty much, we see we have 800 here, 400 here. We see that we went up by, let me switch back to my blue pen real quick. We see we went up from 800 to 400. We went up by from 0 to about 0.55, just about, right? So we're going to go up another 0.5 then, going from 400 to 0. So if we were to go all the way back here to 0, we're going to be right around 1.1, okay? So we're looking for something, y, has to be greater than or equal to 1.1 is our plus. Now we have a decreasing slope. That decreasing slope, we see we go down by 1.1 over about 800. So I'll put that in my calculator, negative 1.1 over 800, get our slope. Okay, we see that that's just about 0.00, looks like it's 137 after that. Let me just check. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we got 3 zeros, 0.000, and then a 137x, right? So it'd be, I'll write that out bigger so you can see it. So we're going to have a y is greater than or equal to a 0.1230, 1375x, and then plus 1.1. Okay, so let's just go ahead and check, find an answer choice that's got that. It's got to be something right along those lines. Okay, we see we have a couple with plus 1.1, so those ones are good. We can go ahead and get rid of A because nothing says it's got that plus right around 1.1 there. Now we know it has to be greater than that, so we can go ahead and get rid of this option here with D because it says P is less than that. We know P has to be greater than that. That leaves us with option C and option B, which both have them being greater than, so that one right there is taken care of. Now we look at B, now we look at this equation right here. So what does it have to be less than, right? Let's go up, take a look at that line. We see that line, if we were to go all the way over, right, we see from 800, if we go up here to 800, it's at about 0.8. And then we see at 400, it's at 0. So it's going down by just about 0.8 for every 400. So if we go 400 more over to 0, we're going to go down another 0.8 from where it was at 400, which we see if we were to continue that line. I'm going to put it in red so you can see the line different, right? So we've got this line here in red. If we were to continue that, at 400, we're at about 0.2. We're dropping. We went from 800, we were at 0.8 down to 0.2 here. So that's a drop of 0.6. So we're going to drop another 0.6 and we're going to be at just about negative 0.4 when we hit that 0. So we're going to look for something that has negative 0.4 or something along those lines. I see neither one does, so that doesn't really help me there. So I'm going to have to find what error I just made, right? We know that P is going to have to be less than that, so we can't get rid of anything based on that. Really what we're looking to determine here then is that y-intercept. So it looks like I made an error here. Let's go back and find what I did wrong. Okay, we see at 800, we are at just about 0.85, and we see at 400 here, if we were to continue this line, we're going to probably be maybe just below that 0.2, so maybe 0.15. Okay, so 0.85 minus 0.15, so 0.85 minus 0.15. Okay, I see what I did wrong. So we see we dropped by about 0.7 or 0.6. I started at 0 here. That's where I made my mistake. I need to start from this right around 0.2. When I do that 0.2 then minus that, or 0.15 minus that 0.7 change, that gives me negative 0.55. I go down here, find my answer that's closest to that. I see that that's going to be closest to B, so my answer for 24 there is going to be B, right? So that one right there, that one's a little bit tricky. You had to make sure that you were really paying attention to your graphs and your changes. Another way that you could have solved for this one right here is to find the slope. And that's actually probably would have been the more efficient way to do it. So I actually probably should have done that because finding that slope makes it so I don't have to guess as much going off of that graph, right? If I solve for the slope there, that probably would have been an easier way to do it. But either way, we get to the answer B. So B will be our correct answer there. So that one right there, big tips are annotating your graphs. I always recommend to annotate your graphs, right? You see all the markings I made up. Annotating your graphs helps you to not make a visual error, so that's always good. And then as far as other tips, yeah, it's really just understanding these inequalities, right? We knew that P had to be greater than that line. That was, I'll scroll back up and show you. Okay, we know in order to be Salmonite, I'm going to erase some of this. We knew we had to be greater than this line right here. We had to be greater than that to be in this region, but we had to be less than this line up here to be in this region. So it was really understanding that. Once you got that, you were all good to go. All right, now we got question 25. Okay, question 25 is giving us two equations. So we're asked for the system of equations above, it's graphed in the xy plane. Which of the following points do the graphs of the equations intersect? Okay, they're going to intersect when they're equal. One thing that I see right away is that they both have y equals, so I'm just going to set them equal to each other. So we're going to have 2x plus 4 equals this right here. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and multiply this out, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do the FOIL method, right? So we're going to have x times x, it's going to give us x squared. Negative 3 times x gives us minus 3x. And then we have a 2 times an x gives us plus 2x. Then we have a 2 times a negative 3 gives us minus 6. Okay, we know that that's all equal to 2x plus 4. Now we're just going to set it equal to 0. Okay, so we subtract 2x, get rid of that, and subtract 4 here. Subtract 2x, and then subtract 4. So negative 6 minus 4 gives me negative 10. Negative 3x, and then I see I have plus 2x and minus 2x. Those will cancel out. So I'll be left with x squared minus 3x minus 10 equals 0. At this point, I factor it to solve for what my possible solutions are. So I factor that out. I see I'm going to have, I'm looking for things that multiply to get negative 10 but add to negative 3. I know that that's going to be x minus 5 and then an x plus 2. Okay, so those are my factors there, which means that x could equal 5 or x could equal 2, or they both could be solutions. Or I'm sorry, x could equal negative 2, right? Since this is positive 2, it could be negative 2. All right, so now I'm going to take a look. We'll just deal with 5 first. So we're going to plug 5 in, see if they equal each other. Also, I see, actually, I know that I can't use negative 2 because it's not even in my answer choices, so I know I have to start with 5. Okay, so that's one thing there, is paying attention to your answer choices. If I would have plugged in negative 2, I would have wasted my time. I want to plug in 5 because that's my only option here. So I plug in 5. I got 5 times 2, that's going to give me 10. 10 plus 4 is going to give me 14. I know that that's going to have to be my answer because my other option isn't even included here, right? So 5 and 14 would have to be my answer. I'll go ahead and show you how that's true, though, by plugging in down here as well. If we plug in 5 right here, we have 5 minus 3. 5 minus 3 gives me 2. So then I got 2. 5 plus 2 is 7. 2 times 7 also is 14. Okay, so answer there is going to be D. So that one right there is really just algebra. Set your equations equal, and then bring all your x's to one side, set it equal to 0, factor it, find your solutions, and then pay attention to your answer choices so you don't waste time plugging in a solution that isn't there, right? The negative 2 right there, that's not an option, so we don't plug that in. Okay, the gas mileage ms in miles per gallon of a car traveling s miles per hour is modeled by the function below. We know s has to be between those two numbers. Now we're given m of s. According to the model, at what speed miles per hour does the car obtain its greatest gas mileage? All right, one thing you need to understand, if we have this negative in front of this s squared, we know our graph is going to look something like this, right? Because it's going to be a downward sloping parabola since we have a negative in front of our s squared. So it's going to be a downward sloping parabola. It's going to have a maximum somewhere. So there's two ways you can do this. If you have a graphing calculator, one way you can do it is you can just plug this in to your graphing calculator and calculate the maximum. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to explain that to you real quick, and then after that, I'm going to tell you the quickest way to do it, which is actually not using your graphing calculator, but it might be difficult for some of you guys to remember how to do it without a graphing calculator, which is why I'm going to quickly explain how you would do it on a graphing calculator. Also, it's always good to know that other way, just in case you forget the quicker way. Okay, so we've got what you're going to put in your calculator then. Is obviously this equation. So you'd press the y equals button if you're using a TI-84 or a TI-83. You plug in this equation here. You use x instead of s, right? You just use x instead of s. It's not a big deal. And then after that, you'd press the graph button. After that, you'd press second and then trace. Then you would press maximum, which on my calculator is 4. So you'd press maximum, and then you would press enter with it being left bound. Go to the right till it's past that maximum. Press enter again, and then press enter a third time. And then it will tell you where your maximum takes place, which it'll tell you is at 48, right? So we know S would equal 48. We know our answer there would be B for number 26. Okay, another thing to pay attention to is it's asking you at what speed. Okay, so that's S. Okay, so we're solving for X here, not MS. So we wouldn't answer 46. We would answer 48 because that's what our S is when this maximum miles per gallon is, right? Okay, so now that's the way you solve it with a graphing calculator if you would like to, but a faster way to solve it actually involves calculus. So the reason that I didn't start with that method is just because it's going to be possibly a little bit hard to grasp for some of you, so I wanted to start by showing you how you could do it with a graphing calculator. But now that I've done that, I'm going to show you the faster way to do it. Okay, this is much, much quicker. This is the way I would do it if I were taking the SAT. This is the way I'd recommend you do it as well. But I wanted to show you that other way with the graphing calculator just in case you forget to do this. Okay. So if we're asked, right, I already showed you that it's going to be a peak like this, right? We're going to have our maximum right here. So if I know that and I know I have to solve for that maximum, what I can do is I can do something called taking the derivative. Okay, so that's something you learn in calculus. If you have not learned about taking the derivative, I'm going to show it to you now. So what we're going to do here in order to find that maximum is we're going to take this squared value, we're going to multiply it by this 1 over 24. Okay, and then we're going to take the squared value, we're going to subtract 1 from it, so it's 2 minus 1, which will just leave us with s. Then we take that first power right here on this s, multiply it by that 4, which just gives us plus 4, right? And then this s, we take that power it was at, we subtract 1, and now that s is gone, okay? So now we just have plus 4, and then if there's a constant like this, a negative 50, plus 1, minus 1, whatever it is, we ignore it, okay? Then we set it equal to 0. So what we'd have here is we'd have 0 equals negative 2 over 24, which is the same as negative 1 over 12. 1 over 12. Now we still have an s here, okay, and then we have plus 4. Okay, at that point, we go ahead and add 1/12 s to each side. We add 1/12 s to each side, set it equal to 4. Then we have to multiply each side by 12 to get s alone, and we see 4 times 12 gives us 48. Okay, in my opinion, that's the fastest way to do it. Okay, I think taking that time and plugging it into your calculator like that, unless you're really, really quick at typing it into your calculator, this is going to be the fastest way for you to get to your answer, so that's the way I would recommend doing it. But I wanted to show you both ways just in case you weren't comfortable using calculus yet and finding the derivative. Then you can still use your calculator to find the answer. But if you are comfortable with calculus, that's going to be the fastest way to answer it. Okay, so if you're comfortable taking the derivative like that, that's the way I recommend. I don't think I've ever taught taking the derivative yet in this course, so I would write that down in your notes if that's something you want to use. That's something I would recommend writing in your notes just in case you ever do have to use it. Just in case maybe it showed up on the math no calculator section. I don't think I've ever seen a question with derivatives show up on that in my opinion, but I think it could be possible. I don't know for sure, but I would just recommend possibly putting this in your notes if you want to learn how to take derivatives. This is a really simple example. I don't think they'd ever give you some complex example of taking a derivative. I've never seen it. This is about as complex as I think I'd ever see it get, right? And keep in mind also, like, you don't necessarily need to know how to take the derivative. You could solve it using a graphing calculator. That's fine. So either way, whichever one you want to do, you can put either one in your notes. But I would recommend at least putting in this taking the derivative in your notes, just in case at some point you want to use it. But it's your call on that. So with that, we'll move on from 26. 26 answer was B, right? 48. That's how we got it both ways. Now we can go ahead and move on to 27. All right, now we got 27. So we got a table here. It's showing selected values for our function h in the xy plane. We got y equals h of x as a line. What's the value of h of 8? All right, well, I see that since it's a line, it's going to have that same slope, right? So we go from 2 to 4. That means we're going up 2 on our x, and we see we go up 4 in our y, okay? So if I go up another 2, then I'm at 6, and if I go up another 2, then I'm at 8. Okay, so then I've got to go up another 4. That puts me at 15. Go up another 4. That puts me at 19. My answer is going to be 19 at 8. Okay, so that one right there, that one's pretty simple. Not too bad at all. Just one thing to note, notice how I annotate my table. That's something you can use as well. That's something that can prevent you from making a silly mistake. So if you want to do that when you take the SAT and practice test, that's something I would recommend as well. Okay, so that one right there, that's pretty simple. That one's just understanding a line has the same slope, and then we're just increasing by 2 until we get to 8, finding what y equals at that point. That's 19. Okay, so that one right there, pretty simple. 27, answer there is B. All right, 28. Front row of an auditorium has 10 seats. There are 50 rows in total. If each row has 2 more seats than the row before it, which expression gives the total number of seats in the last row? All right, well, our first row, right, that has 10 seats. Okay, now we know each row after that is going to have 2 more for a total of 49 more rows after that. Now, why is it 49 more rows or 50 minus 1? Well, we know there's 50 rows in total, and our first one has 10. We can't count our first one twice, so we have to subtract that first row that we have by doing that minus 1. Okay, so answer there is going to be A. All right, as far as why we know the other answer choices are wrong, I want to show you that real quick as well. Okay, we know 2 to the power of 50 is wrong because that would be exponential growth. Okay, if we're raising it to a power, that's going to be exponential growth, and we know it's linear because each row is gaining 2 more seats than the row before it, so that's linear growth. Okay, the other thing that we see in C to make C wrong is that we have 50 times 10 plus 2. Okay, this one really is kind of a really wacky answer. I don't know how you'd really get to this unless you thought 50 was the amount of rows we were starting with, and we don't want to do that, okay? So we aren't starting with 50. This one really is just way off. As far as B, B would be just if you forgot to subtract your first row, okay? B was the answer that you would get to be wrong if you forgot to subtract that first row you start with, okay? So answer for 28 there is going to be A. So that one right there is just making sure you remember that you start with 1 row, so you subtract that from the amount that you're multiplying by. All right, now we've got 49. An ecologist selected a random sample of 30 prairie dogs from a colony. Okay, random sample means I can apply it to that whole colony since it's a random sample. and found that the mean mass of the prairie dogs in the sample was 0.94 kilograms, with an associated margin of error of 0.112 kilograms. Which of the following is the best interpretation of the findings? All right, as far as margin of error goes, anytime I see a margin of error question dealing with a mean, immediately what I'm thinking for my answer, right, is going to be something talking about how my possible values for my mean of that colony then is going to be somewhere from 0.94 minus 0.12, right, which is going to give me 0.82, all the way to 0.94 plus 0.12, because margin of error works both ways. So I have to add it to the mean and subtract it to the mean to get possible answers for what my mean could be, right? So 0.94 plus 0.12 is going to give me 1.06. Okay, so I'm looking at any answer between those. Okay, now I can't apply it to all prairie dogs because it was from one single colony. Okay, so I can't say A is correct. Also, it says all sample prairie dogs in the sample have a mass between that. No. Okay, those are possible values for the mean. Okay, we can't say all of them will have that mass. That's for the mean. So A is incorrect. B, most prairie dogs in the colony have a mass between 0.82 and 1.06. Once again, that's wrong because we're talking about the mean. Okay, the mean could be anywhere between these two numbers. Okay, so it's not going to be that most prairie dogs are between it. It's going to be that the mean could be between those. So B is wrong. C, any mass between 0.82 and 1.06 is a plausible value for the mean mass of the prairie dogs in the sample. Okay, why is this one wrong? Well, we're asked for the best interpretation of these findings. The best interpretation of these findings will apply them to the colony as a whole because that's what that random sample was selected to represent. Okay, that random sample is supposed to represent this colony as a whole. So we want to apply that mean to the colony. Okay, not the sample. So C is incorrect. So our answer there is going to be D. Any mass between 0.82 kilograms and 1.06 kilograms is a plausible value for the mean mass of the prairie dogs in the colony. Okay, we want to apply that data or interpret that data to where we took that sample from, which was that full colony. So our answer for 29 there is going to be D. Okay, that one right there is really dealing with data. Okay, that one's understanding how to work with it, right? That's kind of a statistics question. Now we got 30. A poster has an area of 432 inches. The length x in inches of the poster is 6 inches longer than the width of the poster. Okay, so the width is going to equal the length minus 6 then. Which of the following equations can be solved to determine the length in inches of the poster? Well, we know length is x, right? And we know that width is 6 inches less than x because the length, which is x, is 6 inches longer than the width. So the width is going to equal our length, which is x, minus that 6. And we know our x is going to equal our length. We know length times width gives us area. Therefore, we know that 432 is going to equal our length, x, times our width, x minus 6. Right? And we know that when we go ahead and multiply that out, we have an x times an x giving us x squared, and then we have an x times a negative 6 giving us minus 6x. Right? And that's going to equal that 432. Okay, so our answer there then is not going to be A because we need minus 6x. It will be B. All right, so what can you learn from this one? Well, one thing on this one I want to point out is that for this one, number 30 here is actually not too tough. Okay, you won't always see number 30s that are that easy. Okay, in this case it is. Oftentimes questions from like 23 through 30, they're going to get more difficult as you go, and 30 will generally be your hardest. So I'll talk more about that when I get into SAT math pacing strategies in the next couple weeks. When I talk about pacing strategies, you'll really see what I mean when I talk about it getting progressively harder and how that affects our strategy. But in this case, number 30 actually turned out to be a fairly easy one, but that won't always be the case. Okay, so I just want to point that out, that that's kind of an anomaly here. All right, so we've got B as number 30. Okay, so that takes us through the math section today. With that, we'll go ahead and switch over to the other section. All right, let's get started with the writing section for today. So today we'll be going through SAT Practice Test 5. We'll be doing 2 passages for the writing section. I'll still be focusing on teaching you grammar rules and accuracy and things like that. Still not really too worried about pace. We're going to worry about pacing a little bit later on, maybe in a couple weeks, maybe 1 week, maybe 2 weeks. Not totally sure yet, but for now, I'm really focused on teaching you grammar rules, teaching you strategies, tips, tricks, insights, all of that. So we're still going at a moderate pace, not trying to go anything fast, not trying to really pace it like we would with the real SAT. We're still going slow so that way I can teach you more. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. This is SAT Practice Test 5. We're going to do questions 1 through 22 today. So we got prehistoric printing. Paleontologists are using modern technology to gain a greater understanding of the distant past. With the aid of computed tomography, scanning, and 3D printing, researchers are able to create accurate models of prehistoric fossils. Give me one moment. I got to switch over to something real quick. All right, there we go. Okay, so we got question 1. At this point, the writer is considering adding the following sentence. Fossils provide paleontologists with a convenient way of estimating the age of the rock in which the fossils are found. So should the writer make this addition here? Well, we just started talking about creating accurate models of prehistoric fossils. Now, whenever I'm asked if I should add a sentence, I always want to know what comes before and what comes after it. So I saw what came before was talking about creating accurate models of prehistoric fossils. I see what comes after is these models. Okay, so I just talked about models. Now I'm talking about them again. And I see I don't talk about models in this sentence here. I don't want to split up that discussion of those models with this inclusion of this detail that's not really related to the main point of this paragraph. So my correct answer here is no, I don't want to add it. And I don't want to add it because it's not directly related to the main point of my paragraph. Okay, I don't want to interrupt this discussion of these models here by including this because it's not directly related to that main point, right? So correct answer there is going to be C. Okay, it's not undermining my main claim, so that's why D is wrong. Okay, so these models have expanded researchers' knowledge of ancient species and promised to advance the field of paleontology for years to come. How did I know it was going to be promised as I read through? Well, the tone of this passage, and keep in mind, this is a tone question, guaranteed, okay? This is all about maintaining the tone using the accurate verb here to maintain the tone of a passage, which in this case is academic, and in most cases of the SAT writing section is an academic tone in almost all cases. Not all, but almost all. I would say a lot of them. I'm not going to give an exact percentage. But we see that we're going to want to maintain that academic tone. We wouldn't swear to advance a scientific field. Okay, that's not an academic tone. We wouldn't subscribe to advance a field or vow to advance a field, but we would promise to advance a field. Okay, we're promising to advance the field of paleontology for years to come. So correct answer for 2 is going to be D. All right, question 3. We got to work our way down. So we got CT scanners use X-rays to map the surface of a fossil in minute detail, recording as many as 1 million data points to create a digital blueprint. A 3D printer then builds a polymer model based on this blueprint, much as a regular computer printer reproduces digital documents on paper. Okay, I'm asked if I should delete the following sentence. Well, one thing I want to note is what came before and then a little bit of what comes after. So what came before is a discussion of a 3D printer and a comparison to a regular printer. Now what comes after is the plastic hardening quickly. Okay, so I want to talk about then some plastic has to harden quickly. I didn't really discuss any plastic in this sentence before, right? This sentence up here. So I'm probably going to want to include something that talks about plastic that hardens then, right? Because up here I have a 3D printer builds a polymer model based on the blueprint, much as a regular computer reproduces digital documents on paper. I never discussed plastic being wet or not being soft and needing to harden. So I'm going to have to go ahead and I'm going to take a look at this sentence and see if it says something like that. So we have, whereas the head of an ordinary printer moves back and forth while printing ink onto paper, the corresponding part of a 3D printer moves in multiple dimensions while skirting out thin layers of melted or soft polymer plastic. Okay, that plastic hardens quickly. I have to include it for sure because otherwise my next sentence is going to make 0 sense. So definitely kept. Why is it going to be kept? Well, it's going to be kept because it's providing details that are illustrating how that 3D printer works, right? It's talking about how that plastic is melted, it's polymer, and then we talk about how it melts quickly. So it's really illustrating how that printer works by including that the printer ink is similar to printing, the movement is back and forth, just like printing ink on paper, except that it's moving in multiple dimensions and squirting out thin layers of plastic. So really illustrating how that printer works. So that's going to be our best answer there. Not because it helps explain why X-rays are used in CT scanners. We're just explaining how a 3D printer works there. So B is our answer for 3. All right, so as far as tips for whenever you're asked to keep or delete a sentence, I'm going to recommend that A, you want to make sure that you know what comes before it, what comes after, and then try to figure out if it makes sense to include it there. And then once you've decided if it should be kept or deleted, go ahead and get rid of the opposite, right? So if you decide it should be kept, go ahead and get rid of deleted. Then just break it down between your 2 that are kept. Find the one that matches your answer choice first. Whenever you're asked if a sentence should be kept or deleted, I would recommend that you come up with your own answer before looking at your answer choices because that'll save you time because you'll be able to get rid of 2 right away because you already have your decision made up. And then also your other one, it's going to pretty much prevent you from getting stuck between 2 because you already know what you want to answer with. So that's just one recommendation I make. All right, next up we got the plastic hardens quickly. If I say the plastic hardens quickly, right, that's an independent clause. Independent clause. So if I'm going to have a comma after it, I have to have one of 2 things, right? I'm either going to have a fanboy and then an independent clause here, or I'm going to have a comma and then a dependent clause. Now, I see that I have it here. If I have it, then this is going to be an independent clause, but I don't have a fanboy, so that can't be correct. If I say this, once again, that's an independent clause with no fanboy. I can't do that. Same thing with that. If I do a comma though and I say which, then that's a dependent clause. So that's going to be my correct answer there. So 4, answer there is going to be C. So compared with older ways of modeling fossils, scanning and printing in this way is extremely versatile. Okay, next up, I see I have a 1 here. As always, anytime I see I have a 1 or any number up top, it means I'm placing a sentence, so I always want to find that question first. So to make this paragraph most logical, sentence 2 should be placed where? And give me a minute, I forgot to silence my phone. I'm going to quick do that. Okay, I just did that. All right, where should sentence 2 be placed? Let's go ahead and read that. So we've got, but now 3D scale models. Okay, one thing that jumps out to me right away is this but now. So I'm going to be looking at something in the past then, right? In the past should come before it, since we said but now. They can be rearranged with ease, which is a huge boon to scientists, which means advantage to scientists. So possibly something talking about advantages to scientists coming after, if this needs to have a sentence coming after. All right, so we have a team led by Drexel University professor Kenneth Lacovara is making models of dinosaur bones 1/10 of the bone's original sizes in order to learn how they fit together when the animals were alive. Okay, answer A is going to be correct for number 5. We don't have to change anything there. It flows well, grammatically correct. It's idiomatic, nothing to switch there. We wouldn't say in order for learning or so that one is learning. That's wordy. Okay, that's wordy. This is not idiomatic, not idiomatic. Okay, we wouldn't say that. And then so to learn also not idiomatic, and I don't even think that's grammatically correct either. So even if it was idiomatic, I don't think we could even say that really. So yep, that's going to be A for number 5. That one's pretty much just an idiomatic question. How they fit together when the animals were alive. Okay, in the past. Okay, look at how I talked about in the past up here. Now that doesn't mean for sure it comes after 4, because if we continued our discussion of whatever we talk about in sentence 4, then we can't place it to interrupt that. So we got to keep that in mind as well. So in the past, such research was limited by the weight and bulk of the fossils, as well as their preciousness and fragility. How did I know it was going to be there? Keep in mind it's this there. Okay, because this there right here is the pronoun there. Pronoun. It's plural and it's possessive, okay? So how did I know it was going to be that type of there and not its? Well, I know that this is referring to the fossils, which is plural, so I can't use its because that's singular. So if I'm going to have to use there, this is the correct there. This is the pronoun there. This there is incorrect, okay? So answer for 6 is going to be C. All right, question 7, asking us to place sentence 2. Okay, so we just talked about in the past. Now we're talking about how the research is limited. Next, I want to see what comes after that 4, because if it's something that's still talking about that research being limited by weight and bulk of fossils, then I can't split it up. So we have, in many cases, scientists had to rearrange bones virtually using artist renderings. Okay, once again, that's continuing that discussion of their research being limited, so I can't split that up. But what I can do then is add it after sentence 5. So after sentence 5 is going to be my correct answer there. Okay. So I hope that that makes sense, and I'm actually going to explain it a little bit more as well right now. Okay, if we have 2 sentences that are connected like this, talking about research being limited, and then describing how they have to rearrange the bones virtually as a result of that research being limited, I can't split them up with a discussion of what happens in the present, because both of these events are happening in the past, right? We have had right here, we had limited. We can't split that up by now switching to the present tense and then switching back to the past like that. So we have to have it after sentence 5 because of that. Okay, next, because CT scanners map objects that are impossible to excavate, CT scanning and 3D printing can also be used to reproduce fossils that scientists cannot observe firsthand. Okay, right here I've got a word with a comma after it at the beginning of a sentence. I know that's basically a transition question from my previous sentence to my current sentence, so I have to read that current sentence. So it says researchers from the National Museum of Brazil. That's going to be relied because we have to maintain tense. Okay, and we've been using past tense throughout this. So relied on this technique to study a fossilized skeleton that was discovered. Okay, once again, that proves that number 9 has to be relied because we're still talking past tense. Protruding from a rock at an old Sao Paulo railroad site. So basically for number 9, I'll answer 8 after this. For number 9, anytime that I see that I have a same base word like this, an example is rely, right? I mean, I'm dealing with my ending, so I know it's a tense question. I can find my tense by looking for other verbs in that sentence. In this case, it was discovered. Or if I know the tense just from having read the passage like I did initially, right? I knew it had to be relied because I had been reading the passage. I knew we were in past tense. Then we can do that as well. So this is confirmation to me because I already kind of knew that. But if you didn't know right off the bat that it was relied, keep reading. You'll see discovered. You know it's going to be relied. Okay, so answer for 9 there is going to be B. All right, moving back up to question 8 now. Okay, so we just got our context for what comes after, which is them relying on that technique to study and discover that fossil. Okay, that's an example then, right? We're providing an example of how they used that CT scanning and 3D printing to reproduce those fossils. So we're giving an example of that, so answer there has to be D. Okay, we're not contrasting anything. We're not saying nonetheless and advancing an argument or anything. We're not saying besides. We are providing an example. So 8 there has to be D. All right, moving on. We've got question 10 now. I see I'm asked to combine these sentences, so I want to read through, find what I can cut out, what's redundant, what's repetitive. So we have the fossil is too delicate to be removed from the rock. Because of its delicate nature, I can get rid of all of that. Okay, that's all redundant because I just said it here. Okay, the team dug up a block of stone around the fossil and brought it to their lab. So I don't want to repeat the fossil being delicate. So anytime I'm asked to combine underlined sentences like this, and I see I have all of this long writing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my shortest answer first. Okay, because my shortest answer is the most likely to be the most concise and efficient, which is what I'm looking for when I'm combining sentences. So I always would start with my shortest answer and then work my way to my longest. So I would go 1, 2, 3, and then 4. That's how I'd work through it. Okay, so number 1, we've got the fossil was too delicate to be removed from the rock. That's true. Comma. So the team dug up a block of stone around the fossil and brought it to their lab. That's perfect. It covers all of our main points. No repetition, no redundancy. C will be our correct answer there. I'm going to show you why 3, 4, and 2 are wrong right now. Okay. Number 2, it says, in removing the fossil from the rock, they found it was too delicate. Okay. Then they dug up a block of stone around the fossil and brought it to their lab. Okay. The use of the word then, right? The use of saying, in removing the fossil from the rock, the team, that's just really kind of wordy. Okay. We could really try to get rid of then, right? That's really kind of unnecessary there. Saying in removing the fossil from the rock, that's really wordy. Okay, it's not efficient. It's not what we'd naturally say. It's really kind of choppy. We don't like D there. Number 3 will go there. The fossil cannot be removed from the rock on account of it being too delicate. That is very, very wordy. Okay, so we don't want to do that. Then we have a semicolon. Moreover, the team dug up a block of stone around it. Okay, moreover is a bad transition here. Okay, we would say therefore. So A is incorrect as well. B, the team thought the fossil was too delicate to remove from the rock, comma, in their next decision. Okay, we don't want to say this. Okay, obviously it's their next decision because it's coming next. So that's also wordy and redundant, so I don't like B either. So C is my answer for 10. All right, now let's go ahead and take a look. We've got question 11 now. With the aid of a CT scanner and 3D printer, they were able to produce a resin model of the fossil. Examining the model, the researchers determined that they had found a new species. How do I know it's they without even looking at my answer choices? I can tell you that'll be the correct answer. How do I know that? Okay, well, I know I'm talking about the researchers. That's plural. Okay, so one is singular. I need a plural verb. Or I'm sorry, not a verb. I need a plural pronoun, which is they. Okay, they is really the only one. So I go down, I see I have he or she, that's singular, it singular, A was singular, I need C. C is the correct answer there. It's going to be they, okay? Because I know it's referring to the researchers, and they are plural. They is plural as well, so that's the correct answer there. All right, now we've got our last section here. So questions 12 through 22 are based on the following. So Thomas Nast, the crusading cartoonist, stop them pictures. Legend has it that the corrupt politician William Boss Tweed once used those words when ordering someone to offer a bribe to Thomas Nast, an artist who had become famous for cartoons that called for reforms to end corruption. Okay, right here, I've got a word at the beginning of the sentence followed by a comma. That means I know I'm looking to link those two sentences there, the one that came before and then the current one. So I don't even read this to start, right? Don't even read that. I go ahead and read what's after. So we have Tweed's attempt to silence the artist failed, and Nast cartoons published in magazines like Harper Weekly actually played a key role in bringing Boss Tweed and his cronies to justice. There's really no great word that we could use, and it's definitely not as a result, okay? Because him offering the bribe doesn't cause this. It's definitely not therefore. Once again, it's not causal, so we wouldn't say therefore. And it's not in addition to either, so we wouldn't say furthermore. We would just delete it and we'd start it with Tweed's attempt. All right, so don't feel like if there's a situation like this, right, and there's really no good transition, don't feel like you have to pick one of those 3 transitions. If you have the option to delete the underlined portion and none of these 3 transitions make sense, it's okay to pick deleting the underlined portion, okay, because that can be the correct answer like it is here. All right, so 12 is going to be D. Let's move on to 13. Which choice most effectively is combining the underlined sentences? Okay, today you're really getting a lot of these questions where you're asked to combine these sentences. As always, I discussed this strategy, I think twice today already, or maybe it was just once, because I do some of these videos, I do them in the same day, so I could get a little bit confused on how many I've seen in this video. But as always, I've talked about this in the last section. I'll talk about it again. We're going to start with our shortest answer, so we'd go 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, because our shortest answer is the most likely to be efficient and concise. So let's take a look. There were powerful political organizations in the 1860s and 1870s. Okay, I repeat organizations here, so I want to get rid of that. They were known as political machines and started taking control of city governments. Okay, so let's take a look at D here. In the 1860s and 1870s, powerful political organizations known known as political machines, started taking control of city governments. That's perfect. That's the most efficient and concise way we could possibly say this. There's no redundancy, no repetition, and we also didn't lose any important information. D is absolutely correct. C, B, and A will have to be incorrect, right? This is really as efficient as we can get without losing meaning. It's perfect. Great sentence there. Great sentence there. So 13 there is going to be D. All right, these political machines were able to pack legislatures and courts with hand-picked supporters by purchasing votes. And then I have a comma here, so I know I have to have a dependent clause after it. A form of election fraud involving the exchange of money or favors for votes. And keep in mind, I said I have to have a dependent clause after because I didn't have a fanboy right here. That's how I knew that. And that is a dependent clause after, so that works perfect. Okay, so answer for 14 there is going to be A. As far as why B, C, and D are wrong, I'm going to go ahead and cover that. We wouldn't say by purchasing votes being a form of election, or I'm sorry, by purchasing votes, comma, being a form of election fraud, because that being there is unnecessary and redundant, so we want to get rid of that. C, that is a form of election fraud. That would create an independent clause, or I'm sorry, let me get rid of this I here. That would create an independent clause after it, which we can't connect with a comma only. We'd have to have a comma and a fanboy. And then which it is, okay, we wouldn't say which it is because that's really wordy and not concise, right? That's too wordy. Also, it would create a, well, it's just too wordy. We'll just leave it at that. You just need to know that. We wouldn't say which it is because then we're being repetitive by saying it, right? We don't have to say it because we already know what it's referring to. It's referring to this election fraud, right? So we don't have to say it is and then say a form of election fraud because we already said what it is in that preceding part, like right around here that I'm underlining. So that right there would be repetitive and redundant and wordy, so we're not going to do that. Once a political machine had control of enough important positions, its members were able to use public funds to enrich themselves and their friends. Boss Tweed's Tammany Hall Group, which controlled New York City in the 1860s. I know I have to have a comma after this. How do I know? Not an M dash. How do I know I have to have a comma after that? Keep in mind, I don't have to have a comma after city, so I can get rid of that, get rid of that. Answer there is going to be B. So how do I know that? Well, let's break it down into its parts of that sentence, okay? Right away when I saw that I have Boss Tweed's Tammany Hall Group, and then a comma, and then I have the word which. Anytime I have a subject or a time or a place, and then a comma, and then the word which, where, or when, or something like that, immediately my mind is going to go to thinking, okay, this is quite possibly a non-essential phrase or clause, which I'll mark as NE, right? And then if I see that I have something come after it like this, in this case I saw I had an M dash, I knew that that was improperly ending that non-essential phrase or clause. It should be a comma since I had a comma up here. We always have to match those, right? So if we used an M dash up top, we'd use an M dash down here, but we used a comma, so we have to use a comma here as well. All right, so as far as how I knew it was non-essential, because if I took it out, I read Boss Tweed's Tammany Hall Group stole more than 30 million. Okay, that's a sentence on its own, so we know it's not essential. We know we have to have a comma after after 1860s. Okay, we wouldn't put a comma after city because there's no reason to. That's just unnecessary. So 15, answer there is going to be B. All right, question 16. The equivalent of more than $365 million today. The writer is considering deleting the underlined sentence. Should the sentence be kept or deleted? Okay, I talked about this in the last section as well. When we want to decide if we should keep or delete a sentence, we want to know what's coming before it, what's coming after it. So I'm going to read what comes after it. We have Tammany Hall was so powerful and corrupt that the New York Times commented, and I have to get rid of both those commas because they're both unnecessary. Okay, there's no whenever we have the word that, I talked about this I think 2 days ago. Whenever we have the word that, we do not want a comma after it. And there's also, if we have a subject and then a verb, we don't want to split those with a comma either. Okay, subject, New York Times, verb, commented, we don't want a comma there either. So let's get rid of that. So we want nothing as far as punctuation there. So I'll go ahead and answer 17. We do want a comma after commented though. I should add that. Okay, we do want a comma after commented because we begin a quote. And if we're going to begin a quote like that, we want a comma before it unless it's that. Okay, if the last part is that and then a quote, we don't put a comma there. But if it's any word other than that, we do put a comma before that quote. Okay, so there should be a comma at the end there. So correct answer for 17 there is going to be C, right? No punctuation until that comma at the end. Right? We don't want to split that subject verb up. We don't want to have a comma after that, but we do want one before we begin that quote. Okay, in the city, there's absolutely nothing in the city which is beyond the reach of this insatiable gang. Okay, so now we can go back and answer 16. Should we keep or delete that sentence? So we know that we talked about the greed of the Tammany Hall Group and all that money that they had. We talked about how they were an unstoppable gang ruling the city. Nothing could stop them. So do we want to include that Tweed had been elected to a single 2-year term in Congress in 1852? No, definitely not. Okay, so that should not be kept. Should definitely be deleted. because it's blurring the focus of the paragraph by introducing a loosely related information. Okay, it's loosely related because is it about Tweed? Yes, but do we really care that he did a single 2-year term? No, we do not, because it's all about his corruption, and that's not really feeding into his corruption. So 16 there, answer is going to have to be C. Going down, now we got question 18 because we already answered 17. Given the extent of Tweed's power, it is remarkable that a single cartoonist could have played such a significant role in his downfall. Nast's cartoon depicted Tweed as a great bloated thief. One of the artist's most famous images showed Tweed with a bag full of money in place of his head. Okay, this right here for 18, famous is a perfect word choice there. I'm guessing, okay, I look down here. It's on my screen, obviously. We would never say famous and well-known, famous and commonly known, famous commonly known, because famous and all of those things mean the same thing, so that would be redundant. That's really just making sure that you understand that we don't want to say things twice like that. That's really probably one of the easiest questions I've ever seen, in my opinion. Definitely going to be A there. That should be really give me points at that point. As far as 19, okay, 19, I'm guessing it's going to ask me something specific about something, right? Which choice adds the most relevant supporting information to the paragraph? Okay, our paragraph's really about Boss Tweed's downfall and his greed, so I'm going to look for something that talks about that. So we have a bag of money in place of his head. What's that symbolizing is immediately what I'm thinking. A bag of money in place of his head. Let's look at our options here. A, like many other Nast cartoons, that one was published in Harper's Weekly. That's not touching on that bag of money on his head. Nast would later illustrate Tweed's escape from prison. That doesn't matter either. That's not talking about that bag of money for a head. C, one depiction that omits his signature hat. Once again, that's not touching on that symbol really of his head being a bag of money, which is probably a symbol for greed. D, an image that perfectly captures Tweed's greedy nature. Yes, D is our correct answer for 19. All right, now we've got 3 questions left. We've got 20, 21, and 22. So let's go down and take a look. We've got Nast's campaign to bring down Tweed and the Tammany Hall group was ultimately successful. In the elections of 1871, the public voted against the Tammany Hall candidates, greatly weakening Tweed's power. Eventually, Tweed and his gang were persecuted for it? No, persecuted would mean, I believe it means killed. So no, they were not persecuted for a number of charges. They were prosecuted on a number of charges. And I've seen persecuted versus prosecuted, I think, on another practice test as well, if I'm not mistaken, which I could be. I don't think I am, though. So this is really an important distinction to understand, is persecuted versus prosecuted. When someone's brought up on charges or put on trial, that's prosecuted. Okay, persecuted would be like, if you think back to when, I'm not going to use a biblical example here. If you were to think persecuted, you would basically be thinking someone's persecuted for their religious beliefs, something like that. In this case, that's not what's going on. He's being prosecuted, which is a different word, meaning brought up on charges or put on trial. Okay, so our answer for 20 is going to be D. All right, so that's really just a question on homophones, right? Homophones are words that sound the same and have different meanings. That's really all that is. Okay, so we've got 20 there. Our answer is going to be D. Now we got 21. In 1875, Tweed escaped from jail and fled to Spain and unwittingly brought about one final and then something for the power of political cartoons. Okay, he brought about something. Yeah, that matches our tense. This is obviously a tense question because we have all the same root word here. That's matching tense. Okay, brought is past tense. Past tense escaped here. Okay, he escaped and brought. Okay, both of those need to be past tense. So we need to maintain A for our answer for 21. All right, 22. So we've got, he brought about one final what for the power of political cartoons when a Spanish police officer recognized him from his cartoon and sent him back to jail. Well, that would be a win, okay? So obviously a win as far as tone. That we wouldn't say a win because that's not fitting an academic tone. So we would say a triumph, okay? A triumph is fitting with the academic tone. Okay, we wouldn't say pinnacle or culmination or apex because we have to get that win part of it in there, okay? Alright, so as always, thanks for watching. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Hopefully that was helpful. If it was, there'll be a donation link in the description when the donation link is up and running. Any private SAT tutoring I'm doing will be linked in the description. Any private college admissions consulting I'm doing will be linked in the description. So make sure to have a great day and tune in tomorrow.